Good evening, everybody. Let's bring the Regional Council meeting to order for March the 11th. Welcome to everybody who's in the room. I'd like to acknowledge the Northern Rockies, and this meeting is located in the heart of the traditional territories of the Dene, Cree, and Dunezaw people of Fort Nelson First Nation and Prophet River First Nations. We further recognize the rights inherent in our treaty. Finally, we celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis people who have lived in our region for a long time. So, please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being streamed and recorded. Are there any additions to tonight's agenda? Council? Staff? Thank you. Is there any public online that would like to speak to anything on tonight's agenda? Is there any in the gallery that would like to speak to tonight's agenda? Thank you. Adoption of the agenda is in order, please. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Roper. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. There are two sets of minutes there. The regular Regional Council meeting of February 26th and the Committee of the Whole meeting of February the 26th for adoption. Please. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Roper. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Those are adopted. Thank you. Is there any business arising from those minutes, Council? Staff? No? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to 7.1 and delegations. Ms. Vandersteen is here to talk about a facility waiver for the trade show 2024. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Mayor and Council, for letting me have the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I must be getting old because I have to have notes in front of me these days. I do apologize for not coming before you sooner. However, I thought I was following the correct process in waiting for the budget. And then while I was attending the draft budget meetings, I was a little concerned during the grant discussion that it appeared maybe the chamber wasn't going to be looking for any kind of help or grant aid with the trade show. So I wanted to come in front of you now. Currently, trade show is scheduled. It's scheduled for May 4th and 5th. We are doing okay. It's early, but we have 29 exhibitors booked currently. And that leaves us with about 26 booths remaining, depending on exhibitors and whether they take one booth or more than one, that type of thing. So doing well, halfway there. I'm pretty pleased at this point this year so far. And I want to thank you for your help last year. So both in waiving the facility fees and in the $15,000 that you sponsored for the trade show. It was the first trade show, as you know, in 3 years, and it was successful. With lower numbers, as I think everybody recognized. And without your support, we would have been running a deficit. So we did come away with about $6,000, a little over. But without the support of the NRN last year, we would have either had to cancel or we would have run about a $9,000 deficit, which, I mean, obviously the chamber can't do. So we would have had to make some tough decisions. It has traditionally been a fundraiser for the chamber. We have seen over the past 10 years a kind of continual decline based on decline in the economy. We've seen less locals able to participate. And so we've been working really hard on attracting both locals and out-of-towners, but it's meant that we haven't been able to raise our prices. It just hasn't been economically sustainable to expect people to spend more. We have and now since the pandemic and the significant increases in the cost of living is also not a good time because we're just not going to get the people to travel up the highway if we do any kind of substantial increase to prices. So we've left those prices alone. I don't think we've raised prices in about 14 years. So keeping it pretty reasonable for people. We've also been able to do some cost savings as well. And so as noted in my correspondence to you, we are requesting your support again in waiving the facility fees and providing the tables and chairs and hopefully the bouncy castles because the kids in Fort Nelson love those. We are not asking for a monetary donation this year. We really do appreciate your support last year. We think we're going to be okay. We should be in the black, assuming that we can get the requested support for the waiving of the fees, and we can sell the rest of our booths in the main arena. I think that everything will be. We're not going to be super wealthy at the end of it, but we should be okay. And so that's my request tonight, is that we receive a fee waiver for the recreation center venue, tables and chairs. The tables and chairs, we've kind of always done a little bit. The rec center has provided some for typically just the seating area around the food court. And we've had the display company, I've rented them the other tables. It doesn't make sense for me, both from a cost perspective, but also from a sustainability and carbon footprint perspective, when we have enough tables at the rec center, and I'm going to bounce them all the way up the highway in a truck. So I am asking, more officially for the tables and chairs, and then as well for the bouncy castles and the staff to operate them, which has typically happened every year. That's it for me. Hoping for your support again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Bev. I think we'll see whether our investment last year was worth it. If this year, if this year's goes well, then it was worth the investment to kick, the one time kick it off and hope to get it going again. And the second year after that first year is maybe the telling year, right? That whether or not the investment was adequate or not. I think this fits part of the new policy that we're working on, and I think if we got a report from staff with respect to what those costs are, it further informs our ability to look at that policy when we get it. I think staff is planning to present that. Maybe I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I think you're planning on presenting that soon to us. So before May the 4th and 5th? Yes? Okay, so sometime in April, hopefully. So that's what I would suggest that we do. But does anybody have any questions? Please. Yep.
Is that going to give you enough time to make the decisions? Like, if you don't get the fee waiver, I'm anticipating that you're not going to go ahead. So if she has to wait till sometime in April, does that give you enough time to make an appropriate, informed decision? Or is there some way that we can make that decision before then to facilitate whether this goes ahead or not?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we wait till the policy comes out. I was asking that we get a report from staff with respect to the costs, which will inform, and we can make, I suspect that a report like that would come back by the next meeting. Yeah, I'm seeing some waves from staff. So I think we would deal with it there, and then it would inform our, that's the advantage I see getting a report, is it helps us to inform that policy that we're trying to do.
Right.
I'm sorry if I didn't make myself clear.
So as a participant in last year's trade show, it was a very delightful time. One of the things, though, that I noticed and you reference it in your letter here is request letter, is that the issue of communicating what's going on in this community is very difficult, and it was last year. And I recall being in discussion with neighbors of mine who did not know that the trade show was going on at all until maybe the day before.
Wow.
And things like that. It's difficult. And so I think this is one of I bring this up simply because this is one of the things that I think has great importance for our community. It really is something where we draw together as a community of vendors and so on and showcase who we are. And most of the interaction is between local people and supporting one another and celebrating each other's successes. And I think that's great. And I just know that there's a good example of why we need to be able to communicate in a more effective way in our community around the events that take place. So it's just a comment.
I appreciate that feedback, actually, and I will endeavor to get more information out there. Big banner across the highway.
Because it was in the news.
Yes, it was covered in the newspaper. Yeah.
Cool. That is May 4th and 5th.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. And hopefully staff will bring a report back at the next meeting. Okay. That brings us to 8.1, the administration report on the community newsletter. We were just speaking about that. Would staff like to speak to the report?
Can. So as council's aware, the topic was brought up in December, and then in January, a resolution passed to have us research and report on the feasibility of a community newsletter. So following the closure of the Fort Nelson News, it was identified that there's some gaps in the community in terms of readily available print information in print. And despite the many different sources of information online, it's recognized that online information doesn't reach all demographics and can be hard to track down, honestly. So there were a few examples that were provided by council in that discussion in January, and we pulled those examples together for you to have a look at. They kind of they run the gamut of what they are: newsletters, newspaper, editorial and content versus things that are generated from the organization that's publishing them. So as we were doing this research, we really realized we needed some further direction from council because we weren't entirely clear, given the examples, what it is that council's after, and honestly where the gaps are in the community. So we recognize that newspapers are something that are typically independent, mostly privately owned. They incite discussion and debate among the public. And that's a stark contrast to a newsletter, which is very much the voice of the organization producing it. So we also took a look at the various publications that we also produce. So those also kind of run the spectrum. So we release something every 2 weeks, generally following these meetings, that summarize the decisions of council. And we've pivoted that since the Fort Nelson News closed to kind of pick up where the newspaper left off in terms of what we use the newspaper for. So highlighting our job postings, highlighting our bid opportunities, using that as a way to announce, public engagement opportunities, et cetera, and where people can find information that we're putting out there. That said, it's been a pretty slow uptake on that. We don't have a whole lot of subscribers, but we also started printing them just before Christmas and leaving little piles of them in public places. So we put them at the post office. The rec center has some. We put them at Grace Manor and Heritage Place, and looking at pinning them to the bulletin boards and the grocery stores and stuff like that. And then, of course, This Week in Rec is a weekly e-blast, which kind of summarizes things that have happened or things that are coming up, but that's specific to things that the rec center is hosting. Our Leisure Guide, which is a seasonal publication, but it's everything the rec center does. So events, programs, schedules, rental information, you name it. And then they also solicit input from community groups to put things about their organizations and programs and services. So it gives a little bit of extra space to profile independent or individual organizations in the community. So those are our routinely provided things, but we recognize that there's still gaps at the newspaper build that those publications don't. So we really wanted to understand, I guess, what the community is missing most, and where there might be opportunities for partnerships. So we canvassed our community roundtable members by email. We followed up with some groups individually. We got a couple voluntary responses, but honestly, it wasn't as fruitful as we expected the response to be. So, that was a bit discouraging because we hear time and again that it's hard to find information. People don't know where to look. And then, that's the kind of collection of groups in the community that are routinely providing services and programs. And I know they struggle with how to get that out there. But my conclusion is they struggle with capacity as well in just responding to emails and setting time aside to have these discussions with us. So I chalk it up to that. So yeah, I think from you, I'm hoping to learn, where do you see the gaps in the community in terms of availability of information? What are you looking to be provided? Is this an entirely new product, or is this something that we can adjust or enhance something that we already do? And then, what's the span that you expect it to be? Just understanding that we might not have full participation from everybody in the community for every edition. Yeah, so I turn it to you.
I'll open it up for comments. Councilor Andrews?
I knew we did a lot. Having it on paper shows how much we really do. Like, we discussed it around the table a lot about communicating out and advertising and trying to get the message out. And this clearly shows we do quite a bit. And when people come to us and say, well, we don't know, I think maybe that's just an opportunity to educate them where we have these resources available. We're in a transition time without a newspaper. People were used to having that on hand. There's just going to be a new way of finding your information. And we haven't gone very many months without a newspaper, and people are feeling it. But we can advertise where we have it. I aside from the private stuff that gets touched on in a newspaper, I think as a municipality, we're advertising, writing out, and giving all of our information in a pretty fulsome way. And for us to try to take on a local newspaper or try to do a little bit more or a whole lot more, I don't think that's onus is really on us. We're doing like, if we can do a little more, sure. But to take on a massive community program to do our local newspaper, I don't see that being something we need to do, especially when we got all this here. There's other creative ways we could look to getting our word out. There's lots of TV screens for advertising around the community. Our rec center has a lot of them. Like, I'm sure we can get more creative in how we put the word out with local things in town without having to resurrect a newspaper that private industry couldn't keep going.
Yeah, those are some great points, Councilor Andrews, and there's certain things that I guess we could do, but there's certain things that the Fort Nelson News was doing that an organization like ours or any other organization wouldn't be able to replicate, like creating journalistic stories and posting things like that. There's so many regulations and laws, things you have to follow, and even just publishing photographs. They're not allowed to be altered in any way, and there's certain things you have to do. So, but there are definitely some gaps that need to be filled. But having said that, typically you would have a for-profit entity. Let's think of Fort St. John. They have energeticcity.ca, and I would imagine that's a lucrative business for that organization. We don't have that here. And would it be lucrative for someone to come in and start that? I couldn't tell you right now, but it just seems like all the organizations are doing their own due diligence, and it's just sort of fragmented. And how do we kind of bring it together to make it a little more cohesive? Because we hear, time and time again, I missed this event because I didn't hear about it, or the trade show, didn't hear about it until the day before. For me, I heard about the trade show right away because we had our experience here, and I talked to people about it, and we advertised at the theater that we were going to be there. We brought in new products to sell. We brought in the mini donuts. That was the first time we did that. We actually did better as far as sales go as we did, at the last one before COVID. So to hear that people didn't know that was happening, it's kind of hard to, I don't know, but it's hard to get the word out to everyone. Even when you do, it's hard to get everyone out to support that specific thing. So it's hard to even just quantify the main issue. But yeah, we've got a pile of just great advertisements here that I'm surprised to look through even. So what do? The question's still up in the air, but I do know that we're not going to be able to replicate an actual a newspaper newsletter perhaps, but definitely not in the sense that it was. And those things are a lot of work, ton of work. So whoever does step up to that plate is going to have their work cut out for them. Absolutely.
So I would agree with that we're not looking, I wouldn't be looking for news content. We wouldn't be looking for editorials. I wouldn't be looking for, photos from around the community that journalists might produce. And we do an awful lot. When I look at what we do, though, it appears to me it's pretty focused at the groups that might want to participate. This leisure guide is an excellent document. I don't read it. I don't spend a lot of time at the recreation center because I don't have kids in hockey. Or if I go there, I'm at the curling club. And if I wanted to go find this online, I suppose I could, right? Because I'm in the Northern Rockies enough to know that we've got a website and I can go find it. But I wonder how many other people, you'd have to be interested enough to go look for it. And the Bear Pit is the same. There's quite a few people who are subscribed to it, and they get about 50% reading rate. So even though people are prescribed to it, people won't have to know that they're interested enough in it to go look for it and actually pull it up or open it if it's already coming to their sites. So, I agree with you when you said it wasn't, I think the word you used was cohesive, that there needs to be something. And I think it is our responsibility to communicate with the public where there is no formal news process. And I think we need to be able to put it in people's hands. We need to go more than what's reasonable, I think, to get it into people's hands. As far as, and I think a hard copy gives us the ability to put it in people's hands by having a good circulation route. And do you have to print, one for everybody in the community when you start? No, I think you start small and you get whatever content you can, and a combination of the information from the Leisure Guide and the Bear Pit and the other things we're doing, I think would be good, because you could write, we could get these people who are writing the content for these to do executive summaries. And you put the executive summary in whatever guide it is or newsletter that you put out there, which then allows people, if they're interested, they read the executive summary of something, and then it's got the link that they would go to if they wanted to go find it, if they have the capability of going and find it. But those who don't, at least get that basic content that gets the main message across. And I think from sitting with the folks when I introduced it at the roundtable, I think there are people who are prepared to participate at whatever capacity they have. And if it starts to get picked up, if people start saying, where is that? Whatever we end up calling it, talk of the town. Where's the talk of the town? I haven't seen it. They'll go find it because there's enough across the span of what's happening in the community that there'll be some interest for everybody, rather than just, well, I'm interested in what council's doing, so I'm going to go to the news from the Bear Pit. Or I'm interested in what's going on at the rec center, so I'm going to go try to find out what's happening at the rec center. There's a little bit of everything. Oh, there's a dance. Oh, there's, and so the Taylor Times doesn't come out like this. They just did fit to page. So every article that was in the Taylor Times for Easter, they had a whole page. That's not the way it comes out. It comes out more like the Leisure Guide. It just has to be formatted. And it comes out as a 11 by 14 folded. So So it's not that expensive to produce. It's got a little bit of stuff. You can look through there from all the different organizations that wanted to put some stuff in there. It's got things in there from some of the other communities, you know, that are close by in the piece. They sort of cross advertise their events. And so I think there's enough there that it makes it little bits there for everybody. And it gets to the point where people actually start looking for it. And when that happens, people, you know, the organizations that aren't participating start to say, hey, that's a good publication that we need to get our stuff into. And they'll start coming out of the woodwork. You don't have to pick up the phone and call them, got any content for the talk of the town. So I believe it can work. If you take the upper end of the cost, 8 hours per publication, so that's 200 hours a year, 25 publications. If you did it every other week, times 8 is 200 hours. You're paying somebody 30 or 40 bucks an hour. That's $6,000 or $8,000. Then the cost of printing. And my understanding is this could be printed in-house pretty easily. So, you know, I think for probably $12,000 or $15,000 on an annual basis, you could get something going that provided all of that information, at least in some summary form, to get people interested to go looking if they need to. My thoughts. Councillor Sol.
I think that every good idea that gets brought to life in the world has someone that champions it. There's got to be the right kind of a person. Someone who just simply can't shut up and keep their nose out of everyone else's business is actually perfect for this job, because they actually can find, you're actually paying attention to everything that's going on, and you're interested in everything, and you're excited about everything. It takes a person like that in order to pull together that kind of publication. Our staff are mostly focused on very, very well focused. Congratulations, you do a good job on the various works of the Northern Rockies. And they have their disciplines and they have their protocol and they have to work at that. And it's not that to find that person who is the core of a community, who's a really communicative person, is key to this. The thing is, and you're just beginning to touch on how you do this, is by finding some money to put toward this. And this report actually shows us where the money comes from, because we have a history of paying 30 grand in advertising in the newspaper for quite a few years. We leaned on it and we considered that normal because that was normal. And so the fact that we've got a history of using the service that was there, I was thinking in terms of when you talk about your community meeting, community gathering that you had here, the various peoples there, what if we had some kind of an RFP that we offered that kind of backs something part way? Like, kind of backs some part way. We're already spending money on this, and we have been for a very long time. If we kick in this, can we find the person, the right type of leadership or group leadership that can bring together a newsletter that's not directly on it's not our own publication? I think that there's potential in that, but I haven't explored the RFP idea very far. But it is a mechanism to bring people in that are interested in being in.
Anybody else? Councillor Growing?
I wrote out my thoughts because that's the way my brain works. And so some of it is a repeat of what other people have already said. But I do have experience in both creating such a newsletter at the college and then the online format through family-friendly events. So it's just like, I'm just going to read through this, and it's, in my opinion, the combination of the rec center flyer and from the Bear Pit that's available online can be subscribed to, and they are available in paper copies. Are sources of information available to everybody in the community free of charge. This Week in Recreation, as we've spoken about, is a great source of information emailed out to subscribers. And what I like most about these formats are that they're target specific. So where you prefer everything in one place, I really appreciate that if I'm looking for something from the Phoenix Theater, I can go there, or Rec, I can go there. So for many years, I produced a monthly flyer for Northern Lights College, and this was distributed through the post office and then through the newspaper, but was halted many years ago, long before social media was actually, you know, the wave, because it was ineffective. And it was very timely to produce and to distribute. I've also been involved in the production of the community's first online event and program calendar. This was very effective method of both coordinating and advertising the community's programs and events. Again, though, it required a lot of hours to populate and was subsequently abandoned. And I had to find all of the information. And I worked directly with the not-for-profits, and they did not submit that information. Even years later, I had to continually go and get it. And that's what made it successful, is there was one person tracking down all that information. The NRM's online calendar shows promise, but is navigating through challenges, one of which is getting organizations to submit their programs and events to populate this calendar. So when I reviewed the Taylor Times, I came to the conclusion that it was very comparable to our recreation flyer, minus the advertising and word searches, the coloring sheets and that. Our recreation flyer contains programs and events hosted by the NRM and by locals and not-for-profits and other organizations. Previously, not that many years ago, this flyer was mass-produced and distributed throughout our communities. So through the post office, I don't know if it ever made the newspapers, but concern around waste involved led to the flyer being made available online, emailed to subscribers with paper copies available at the rec center. I personally still use the paper copy. I go every quarter and I go get the new printout of it. Perhaps paper copies of this flyer and from the Bear Pit could be circulated throughout town to businesses and organizations. So like Jaylene had mentioned, that they have been printing them off and taking them to other places. And I would not support a mass production and distribution of it, but just make it more available. And then I guess I just wanted to mention too that there are many community bulletin boards around town. We all know what they are, but the town center, library, post office, home hardware, rec center, etc. And they seem to be really well used and provide a place for everyone to advertise, again, free of charge. And I know that some people read them and some people don't, but it's just another avenue to communicate. Yeah, so I am really struggling with committing any more resources to try to coordinate this information. I just am struggling with that. So I'll end it there.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Wishes? Do anything with the report?
I would like to see this report brought back every once in a while, just not necessarily for discussion, or just it's another way for those people who look at our agendas to see where our print sources are available. So like maybe not a full cohesive, but maybe just every once in a while, if we could, I don't know if that's something we can do with our agendas, like resources on tonight's agendas and all other agendas can be found here. Like maybe just other little creative spots to look for, have them on the bottom of our emails even, right? And signatures wise, like this is a lot of good information that I think everybody could remind themselves to look at from time to time. I think it might help shed light on what we have.
I like that. I like all the ideas that we've discussed here. Communications is always the issue, right? We struggle with it out at the nation of, you know, people saying, oh, we didn't know that was happening. Where was it advertised? Not a lot of people have access to cell phones and tablets and that type of information. So I think that we have some obligation to make sure that our information gets out. I don't know if we're responsible for everybody's information. I think there's organizations, the Phoenix Theater or the Chamber of Commerce or the community events that could take on a project like this, because there's funding out there for it. Community communications, developing the process, because really what you need is somebody to collect it and populate it. And whether it's a QR code that's sitting on every till at the register, cash register at the grocery store, so you can QR it and then you've got the information, the access, but who's collected it, right? But I think there's, we do have some sort of obligation to our information, and we hear it all the time that it's Rendezvous. I didn't know it was Rendezvous. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for the discussion. I think it's time to move on to the next item. So 9.9 is correspondence letter from Rob Stiles, Northern Adaptive Sports, looking for a letter of support for NDIT. So if anybody's interested in talking that, I'll have a motion to move it for discussion. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, it's on the floor. What are your wishes?
I thought it was a good thing for us to support. Someone's looking to solicit some money for hopefully bring into our community. So I would make a recommendation that the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality support the application to NDIT from Northern Adapted Sports Association for the Northeast Sports for Everyday projects.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Andrews. Do I have a second? Second, Councilor Groom. Further discussion or comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. There are 4 items for information. There's a letter from Dan Davies with respect to patient releases. Our letter to Northern Health with respect to CT scanner, 2 council information packages for information. Mover, look for that. Moved by Councilor Andrews, second. Councilor Souls, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. You? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Did you?
I just want to compliment everyone on the letter to Northern Health. Like that was a lot of information, and it was written clearly, concisely, easy to follow, and yeah, it took a huge amount of information and made it readable. So well done to everyone.
Okay. That brings us to, there are no new business. Council reports. There are any? Please.
So in addition to the extra budget meetings and the community forest update, I attended the following. So on the February 28th, the BC Rural Health Network board meeting, and February 29th, I attended the second meeting of the OCP steering committee. March 6th, I attended the community roundtable, and March 8th, I attended the community health plan steering committee. And just wanted to mention a few things that came out of that meeting is the work plan for the 2024 objectives is growing our own and advocating for increased health travel services is nearing completion. There is currently a lot of work on both of these objectives. There we go. I've written down objections, but it's okay, taking place in our communities by multiple agencies, and the work plan will identify gaps with the intent to fill them. So more information will be following. And sad to say that the Fort Nelson General Hospital will have another service interruption on March 13th unless some miracle happens, and it will be from 4 a.m. to 7 p.m. There could be further interruptions in March, but they have not been confirmed yet. Palliative care upgrades are taking place at the Fort Nelson General Hospital, and an information package for families is being prepared. And Lee Cook, our community paramedic, has been awarded the Tony Sutherland Award for commitment to service and community. So congratulations to Lee, very well deserved. And March 11th, I attended the Rural Emergency Health Services Innovation UBC Research Project Focus Group, which is focused on understanding real-time innovation in BC rural emergency health services and to improve healthcare access for rural and remote communities. Additionally, today I attended the BC Rural Health Network executive meeting. That's it.
Okay, are there any other reports? I guess I'll just talk briefly about, well, I attended a NDIT meeting, a board meeting in Prince George. It was really an acceptance of the financials for the year, getting ready for the strategic planning that we're going to do next time. There were quite a big discussion with respect to the fund itself and reducing the amount of risk in that fund, which is a very large fund. And so in order to reduce risk, they have considered changing fund managers, which is kind of a big deal when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they've chosen the BC Investment Company, which is provincially similar to now I just lost it, the municipal insurance or municipal finance. Municipal finance is owned by the municipalities, but the BC Investment Corporation is provincially owned, and all of the major government organizations, I guess, that are investing their money out there, BCIT, WCB, those big investors all use them. $338 billion of investment money they've got. And so what it allows NDIT to do is spread their investments across some private. The investment corporation that they've got there now is only in securities and is not in some of the private stuff. And so it's a less of the ability to spread the portfolio over various investment opportunities. And so they've decided to do that in order to switch so that they can do that. I'm murdering what I'm trying to say here, but essentially they've changed investment managers in order to reduce the risk for the amount of money they've got. So and BC Investment Corporation is who they put the money. And that was a big conversation because it was there was a little glitch with and although the previous investment firm did a fantastic job for them, particularly when it went down, there was a little bit of a glitch, and unfortunately it happened just before they made the switch. It had nothing to do. It was a bit of a internal securities issue, but was all dealt with in a very professional manner. Unfortunately, it happened just before they decided to make this switch. So I'm sure they're going to think that that's what happened. But we asked the staff to send them a really good letter explaining why we're switching. And if they're in that business, they'll understand. So that was the high level. We have a RAC meeting coming up on Friday in Fort St. John, where we'll look at all of the new applications put in for all these NDIT applications that we've been hearing about through our agenda. So I'm looking forward to that. I did speak with senior management of the RCMP with respect to some of the issues that we had. Was able to get it down to the Prince George level and have a discussion there on the phone, and I'm satisfied, I guess, that the process with respect to manning and personnel issues, at our detachment are being looked after appropriately, and fairly. So I'm comfortable there. And I guess finally, I did an interview with respect to the zombie fires, is what the media is calling them, the holdover fires from last year. I did a couple of interviews with CBC over that. And I think that's everything. Anybody else? Okay. So that brings us to business outstanding, the NRM grants for community groups, having a discussion around the capital, funding capital projects. I'll turn it over to the deputy
Thank you,
CEO.
Mayor.
Yeah.
We just wanted to, after we debrief the budget meetings as staff, we realized we just had a couple more just questions or just information we would like to solicit from council in regard to sort of what their thoughts were around capital with community groups. Because we realized we were missing a few pieces when we tried to sort of walk through the information that we had. So we just wanted to confirm that council in general is supportive in providing capital to grants to groups or to community groups. And then also to sort of discuss a little bit or explore what is capital? Because when you say the words capital, it could mean different things to different people. So when you talk about, so we're going to reach out and explore the options to attach an obligation to that piece of capital. And when you talk about that, if you think about things that we've added to buildings, we talk about roofs or decks or things that we may have added to a building, which is capital. We don't want to assume that you don't want to, like, when you think about capital, are you thinking about one single piece of equipment? Are you thinking about a snowmobile? Are you thinking about a large piece of an item? So we just kind of wanted to get that discussion going a little bit more because we use the word capital and it could mean so many different things to so many different people.
Councilor Roper, question?
For me, capital would be equipment needs or anything, a tangible asset that's required for that business to either operate on a day-to-day basis or enhance that organization. When I think of roofs and building upgrades, if the town owns the building, then that's the town's capital and that's their property. And if we're renting to an organization, that should be separate from the organization's capital need. Different organizations have different capital needs, and some of those capital needs are pretty great. I can just use the theater as an example. You know, I mean, if a projector breaks, that could be $120,000 replacement the next day. And if you don't get that replacement, you don't have movies, and if you don't have movies, you don't have an operation. So it's pretty important, but I think it's up to the organization to express their needs and provide us with those capital plans and give a justification. And also, if there's any grants that can offset capital, I mean, there's hardly any grants for organizational purposes, but for capital, there's a lot out there. So I think it's going to be a mix of providing capital, but perhaps only providing it if it's absolutely necessary or if it's subsidized with some sort of other grant to make those dollars stretch. So that's my take on it.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Like, I'm pretty much in agreement with everything you said. It's just there's been times in the past where it's been a little gray, and we haven't had really a cohesive direction from council. Some groups we'll go and buy a boat for, or we'll put a roof on it. Some we would just, we scrutinize on what they're using on operations. So having this direction and having this conversation about what we think is capital is great, and it needs to be part of our new policy that we get out. So yeah, I would have to agree. If it's a mower, a boat, something tangible that if the organization were to dissolve, there's going to be something tangible they got to get rid of, like books at a library, seats at a theater. Like, I don't know how in depth we want to get, but we should be setting some parameters here on what we consider capital and what's an acceptable capital expense when it comes to our community groups, for sure.
So if I can actually clarify there, I heard two things. So I've heard what's capital, and then I heard the ability to return. That's two separate things, right?
Well, it's just all on how we've sat here and tried to establish to ourselves what capital is, right? So for me, it would be anything tangible that could be returned or not. But for others, it's a roof, it's an entranceway, because it's capital investment into their organization, right? Like, so, you know, I can see it as the way Councillor Roper puts it, but someone else could add more things on it and it could make sense to me. So like we need to sit down and have those conversations, write it down, because I can argue both sides of it on whether or not the infrastructure can be capital or not, right?
Yeah,
Does that clarify it all?
yeah, yes, thank you. So it brings a question to my mind about what it seems to me from last year's budget, which was the first budget I was involved in here. It was both. We provided funding for the museum building and many hundreds of thousands of dollars. We provided money for equipment, the Rescue Society, for instance, you know, so why is staff asking us now when really those are the two things, right? It's something that's going into a building and it's going to stay there, or it's going into a piece of equipment that they can use wherever they want to use. One you can get back, or at least, but both you can get cash back if they sell it. You've got some kind of an agreement with them before you provide the capital that they have to return that money if they go insolvent or if they don't use whatever it is, or if they try to sell it for some reason. I mean, you know, they come up with a great idea, a riverboat, they never use it, and 5 years later they sell it for $70,000 and use that money for something else. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, because we've done all those things in the past already. So why are we trying to distinguish now?
Because we've never attached an obligation to the capital. We've never attached that obligation to that funding. So, and that obligation can take many forms. Like it could take everything from we retain ownership of it to we give them the cash and they maintain the ownership of it. And we just have an agreement with them in place. So we're just trying to gain or gauge where council's looking to go with this discussion. So when we start to look for answers and solutions from a legal perspective as to what we can or can't do. And then we also want to be able to frame that conversation with the pros and the cons of, you know, it may not be in our best means to retain ownership of an asset, because if you retain ownership of that asset, you retain the liability, you retain
Maintenance.
commitments to that asset, versus if you give up that ownership of the asset to that organization, and then what right do we legally have to? So we want to look at all of these options. We just wanted council just to have an opportunity just to provide a little bit more of their thoughts before we went off and started formulating research.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Gordon.
Thank you. So for me, capital is anything that isn't directly related to operations. That's the way I think about it. And throughout my years, I felt that there is inequities in some organizations will fund capital for, and some organizations we won't. Some councils will fund some capital for some groups, but not for others. So for me, using a criteria-based decision-making model, I don't have any criteria, because this is my third council and decisions are made differently. Like, you know, and I know that on some organizations, past councils have absolutely refused to fund capital, but then other organizations we have. So that is what I hope that we get to, is like those tools that allows council to make a decision based on criteria and not based on what organization you prefer one over the other, or, you know, not to say that anybody did that, but, you know, so that you can sort of justify your own decision making and that it's equitable for all of the groups that we're supporting. And I guess, I mean, I think as an example, if money is given to purchase 9 tractors, right? Is that like, what happens to those 9 tractors when they're sold? The municipality taxpayers' dollars have been used to purchase 9 and I'm just saying tractors because I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what.
Right. So then, you know, what happens to them when they're sold? We don't get any of that like that. We don't retain any of that. Doesn't come back to us. Like, and yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Okay.
I only have one thing, and I think asked the question before when we were not in a meeting, but I don't think we should be funding capital. I think capital should be funded through the organization, like for instance, say the Historical Society, when they wanted to buy $80,000 worth of vehicles, like historical vehicles they wanted to buy. Why not have them resubmit their application of you use your own capital to buy that, but we will fund your operating costs. Like, I don't think that we should be funding capital because there's too many gray areas. Or if we are gonna fund capital, I think there should be a cap. We're not funding 80,000, we'll fund 50% or 60%, and you find, well, whatever the number is, but you find the rest of the funding from somewhere else. But most funding applications that I've filled out for capital, the organization that's funding it has no claim to that asset. It's in the agreement that they're going to fund that as part of their funding policy, but they own no ownership or responsibility for that asset.
There is a lot of gray areas. Okay. Okay. That did help a little bit. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any notice of motions? Okay, is there any public that wishes to ask any questions online? No? Any in the room? No? Okay. I think adjournment is in order. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Roper. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We are adjourned.